wouldn't even let my dad come and see me at our school's sports day, stupid egg and spoon race, so I have no idea how some people can perform in front of the man who helped bring them into this wretched world, let alone perform alongside them. But that is exactly what some noteworthy sports entertainers have done in the past, whether they were big stars in their own right, rookies looking for a familial rub, or no-hopers struggling to get out from under their dad's looming shadow. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 father and son pro wrestling tag teams. Join us! Number 10, Jerry Lawler and Brian Christopher. One of the recurring jokes during the Attitude Era was the insinuation by Jim Ross that Brian Christopher was his co-commentator Jerry Lawler's son. King always denied it, but it was obviously true. And while Christopher, as Grandmaster Sexay, may have made his mark in the company's tag division alongside Scotty 2 Hotty and 2 Cool, he actually teamed up with his old man first. Funnily enough, the two men started out as rivals in Lawler's USWA promotion in the early 90s before becoming a regular team in Memphis. They had a few matches on WWE television in 1997, the first of which was against another father-son combination, Ivan and Scott Putski. They also competed against cobbled-together duos like Flash Funk and Scott Decidedly Lukewarm Taylor and George Steele and Taka Michinoku before their brief run came to an end. Well, in WWE at least anyway, because Lawler and Christopher would continue teaming off and on in the home of the Blues and beyond, with their last outing being a six-man affair as they tagged with Doug Gilbert to take on the Rock and Roll Express and Terry Funk in 2017. Number 9, Chavo Sr. and Chavo Guerrero Jr. After Chavo Guerrero Jr. turned on his Uncle Eddie and raised the ire of Latino heat, the jealous nephew turned to his dad and Eddie's brother for a little bit of backup. Chavo Sr., subsequently labeled Chavo Classic, presumably because he is in fact a type of fizzy drink, came to his son's aid, teaming with him against Eddie and Kurt Angle. They got the win there, just as they did against John Cena in a handicap match. Other bouts came against Rey Mysterio and Spike Dudley, as well as teams like the FBI, and then tag team champions Rico and Charlie Haas on house shows. A touch of friction between the Chavos developed when Classic accidentally won the Cruiserweight title from his son in a triple threat match, also including Spike. The gold and glory went to Chavo Sr.'s head, and he became something of a comedic ladies' man with an apparent fondness for wearing women's underwear. How much do WWE writers get paid again? There was certainly potential for Chavo Jr. and his pappy to do more, but Classic was let go in the middle of their storyline after no showing one too many live events. Number 8, Fritz and the Von Erich brothers. For all his many faults, and if you don't know about them, there's a movie featuring some handsome young men to educate you on the subject. Fritz Von Erich was a major star and one of the key reasons wrestling was so big in the Lone Star State. A hated foreign menace heel in his prime, Fritz became a beloved babyface toward the end of his in-ring career, thanks in large part to the popularity of his bone-bending sons Kevin, Kerry, Mike, and David. The patriarch and world-class champion wrestling promoter tagged with his sons on multiple occasions, mostly in 6, 8, and 10-man tags between 1977 and 1984. The emotional pinnacle was probably in their last match together, as Fritz, Kevin, and Mike Von Erich fought for the honor of the recently departed David against perennial rivals the Fabulous Freebirds. Not only did they beat Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts in front of over 30,000 fans in Irving, Texas, but they also took home the world-class six-man tag titles to boot. That was followed by Kerry beating Ric Flair to win the NWA Heavyweight title in an emotionally charged main event. Number 7, Bob Orton Jr. and Randy Orton. Much was made of Randy Orton being a third-generation star during the early days of his WWE career. And why not? After all, his grandfather Bob Orton Sr. was a decorated star of various territories, while his father Bob Orton Jr. was a big deal in many places, most notably WWF during the 1980s. Ostensibly retired from the business, Cowboy Bob resurfaced in 2005 to help his son in his dispute with The Undertaker. The legend killer and his Hall of Famer daddy not only teamed up to defeat the dead man in a handicapped casket match at No Mercy, but also clashed with Orton Jr.'s old running buddy Roddy Piper. They also partnered with Kennedy to lose to Piper, Batista, and Eddie Guerrero in a wonderfully random SmackDown main event. Cowboy Bob, who also acted as his son's ringside manager / interference runner, may have stuck around and got in the ring more often had he not been let go after Taker found out Bob had hepatitis C after he had bled all over him during his Hell in a Cell match with Randy. Number 6. Bruno and David Sammartino. David Sammartino had a tough act to follow, didn't he? Son of the legendary Bruno Sammartino, young David couldn't really hope to replicate the tremendous success of the beloved living legend. Sensing that his kid might be fighting an uphill battle when it came to acceptance, Bruno came out of retirement in 1985 in order to team with David, who by that point had been wrestling in the US and overseas in Japan for 4 years. The Sammartinos teamed up on about a dozen WWE cards and were undefeated against the likes of Paul Orndorff and Bobby Heenan, Brutus Beefcake and Johnny V, and Bob Orton and Roddy Piper. While Bruno had the best of intentions in putting the boots back on to help his son's career, their teaming together only further emphasized how much better and more popular the multi-time world champion was in comparison. David's career never really truly took off, and he ultimately faded away from the business. While wrestling may not have given him the riches that it did his father, for David, I'm sure that the memories of tagging with him, especially in Madison Square Garden, were priceless. Number 5. Vince and Shane McMahon. Vince McMahon Sr. had always discouraged his son, Vince Jr., from trying his hand at actually wrestling. It clearly ate McMahon up inside, hence why he pretty much literally threw his son headfirst into the ring wars. The WWE owner and his apparent heir, good luck with that, began by butting heads, but soon put their differences aside in their attempt to take down Steve Austin. As well as Stone Cold, Vince and Shane also teamed up against the Stooges and the Dudley Boys in those early days, before they went back to scrapping with each other once more. Fast forward to 2006 and they were back together again, joining forces to take on Shawn Michaels and, God, before the Heartbreak Kid swapped his creator for dick and fart joke aficionado Triple H. The reformed D-Generation X battled the McMahons for several months, and to be blunt, it didn't turn out well for father and son. Months later, however, they were back at it, forming an alliance with Umaga and trying to keep the ECW title around the waist of a do-rag wearing Vince. Yep, that was an actual thing that happened. Number 4. Larry and Curt Henig. Larry the Axe Henig was one of the mainstays of Minnesota wrestling from the early 1960s to the mid-80s. A big barrel-chested bruiser who regularly teamed with other intimidating grizzled bastards like Harley Race and Fritz von Erich, Larry's son Curt was cut from an altogether different cloth. A smaller and more athletically gifted technician, Curt got his start as a singles wrestler in the AWA and WWF before he started tagging with Pops in the Portland-based Pacific Northwest Wrestling. It was in Portland, after just a handful of matches together as a unit, that Larry and Curt bagged the PNW Tag Team titles by defeating Matt Bourne and Rip Oliver. They lost them back to the same people just a few days later, yes, but the history books show that they are one of the few father-son tag teams to win gold together. A couple of years later, they were a top act in the AWA and had a notable series of matches with the Road Warriors, though they never managed to capture their tag straps. By the time they stopped teaming, Curt was clearly ready to move on to bigger and better things, while Larry was ready to call it a career, satisfied that he got to spend the last years of it alongside his son. Number 3. Ric and David Flair. Ric Flair's daughter Charlotte is a real chip off the old block, isn't she? A multi-time world champion in her own right, the Queen has forged a legacy all on her own, and it's been a long time since she was simply viewed as the Nature Boy's little girl. Ric Flair's son David, on the other hand? Look, I want to start by saying that WCW put David out there way before he was ready to be in a wrestling ring, let alone wrestling on global television and pay-per-view. I mean, at least he was in good hands for his debut at Sold Out 1999, teaming with his father against two experienced pros in the form of Curt Hennig and Barry Windham. The Flairs got the victory too, though it would be one of only 2 times they would share the ring as partners. They had a singles match as well as a few tag bouts where they were on opposite sides, with the next time they were tasked to work together coming on an OVW show of all places in April of 2002. Once again, Ric and David got the win, beating Sean O'Haire and John Prototype Cena of all people. Number 2, Dusty and Dustin Rhodes. Dustin Rhodes was a natural when it came to the professional wrestling business. I mean, it said so in his theme song and everything. Though he may not have had the overflowing charisma of his father Dusty, the natural was a dab hand in the ring, and it wasn't a surprise to see him tag with his old man so early in his career. Not only did they have several matches against the $1 Million Man and Virgil in the Fed, but the Rhodes lads also teamed up on one of New Japan's January 4th Tokyo Dome Spectaculars. The next time they got together was as part of an emotional storyline in WCW, leading to matches with members of the Stud Stable. Dusty was winding down his in-ring appearances by this point and focusing more on booking, so it took almost 7 years for him to tag with Dustin again, as they defeated Jeff Jarrett and Ric Flair on WCW's last ever pay-per-view. Post-WCW, the son of a plumber and the grandson of a plumber tagged for Dusty's own Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling promotion, Japan's Barmy Hustle group, and on a couple of indie shows. Number 1, Rey and Dominic Mysterio. Rey Mysterio may not be considered a tag team great or anything due to the strength of his Hall of Fame singles accomplishments, but he did form successful teams with Conan, Billy Kidman, Edge, Rob Van Dam, Eddie Guerrero, Batista, Big Show, and Sin Cara. The masked man clearly knows how to make it work with anyone, regardless of their size or style, so he likely felt confident about having good chemistry with his own flesh and blood. Dominic Mysterio had been an intermittent presence on WWE TV for close to 20 years, literally growing up in front of the camera, before he decided to give it a shot himself in 2020. In just his second ever match, Dom teamed up with Rey to take on Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy in the main event of Monday Night Raw. They continued to team throughout the pandemic, with Dominic learning on the job by getting to watch a master at work every single night. They became a popular act and were good value for a 2-month reign with the SmackDown Tag Team titles. Unfortunately, it all ended in tears, of course, with Rey finally getting his long-awaited wish at WrestleMania 39.